Self-sabotage. It sounds a little bit to me like the title of the next made for Netflix movie, thriller. But speaking from personal experience, it's something that I have experienced or fallen, I hate to say victim to, but it's super, super common. So I am really excited to be sitting down with you, Jill Farmer, to talk about self-sabotage, what it is, how it manifests in our lives and careers, and what we can do to work through it and find more positive, empowering ways to move forward through some of those traps. So, Jill, thank you so much for sitting down with me today.
Oh, thanks. I'm really glad to be here. I love talking about ways that we can make some shifts in our life for taking those things that aren't working so well for us and seeing if we can steer in a slightly different direction.
Well, absolutely. Well, you are a time management, stress expert, leadership coach. Talk to me, just so everyone understands why you were such an incredible person for me to sitting down and chatting with, and some of the perspectives that you're going to help bring on this really common topic.
So I'm a master certified life coach, but specifically I work within corporations and organizations, everybody from Harvard Medical School to startup companies, mainly working with teams and leaders and organizations to help them get more meaningful work done in less time. And I work a lot with companies to be able to make the workforce sustainable so we don't have burnout and things that create situations where people are feeling like, I just can't continue doing this. My intention is to help people do work that matters to them in a long-term sustainable way, as opposed to just thinking about, trying to do all they can before they fry or burn themselves out.
Well, and here we are a year plus into a pandemic. I think that's a really universal experience that many of us were experiencing before, certainly, but in all new ways now. And then as we think about what the future is going to look like, I think it's such an important topic to figure out how we confront the stress that we feel at home and at work, which really bleeds together as well. None of these, experiences that we're having at home or life are mutually exclusive. And so what I'm excited about is talking to you about how to have the awareness and understanding of what these things are, and then the patterns and things that we have, and then also how we can find solutions to move forward. And so as we said, self-sabotage, whether it's a concept that people are familiar with or not, talk to me about what self-sabotage means to you and how it manifests in our daily lives.
Well, usually when people come to me and say, I think I'm self-sabotaging, or I think it means that they realize that there's a desired outcome in a given situation, and that something they're doing in their behavior or reactions or the way that they're doing it is creating an outcome they don't want. And they're recognizing, I'm doing something. A lot of times when we're talking about self-sabotage, it's not a unique behavior. It's a pattern of behaviors that we will repeat over and over and over again. And we go, that's that thing I do in that situation. And I get that result, which isn't what I really want. And so that's the kind of generalized view of self-sabotage when I'm working with a client, whether it's an executive or a group of people. It's like, what are we doing here that isn't working for us? As Dr. Phil used to say, how's that working for you? And if it's not working so well, how do we look at creating the situation so that we're not being part of sometimes the outcome has nothing to do with us, right? But if we're part of an outcome because of a pattern of behavior that we default to, that's not what we want, then it's time to look at that and see if there's ways that we can shift that.
Yeah. Just kind of personalizing it in a way and kind of help. Thinking of an example, procrastination, I think, is one of those things that it's a pattern that I tend to find myself on, and at times I can find procrastination being a useful tool, creating deadlines, and maybe I push it to the end, and sometimes I convince myself that I get the best work out of myself from that. But sometimes I've found that procrastination can then lead to missing a deadline, pushing a deadline too far and then missing it, which can be a form I've seen manifest as self-sabotage. And so I'm missing a deadline, or not doing my best work, or even perhaps like ghosting on an email or something that it's like that email with the result or the thing that you've been working so hard towards. And then you just don't read and you don't do anything with that email, kind of that frozen point. Those are two areas that I've found self-sabotage occur. And then, as you pointed out, occur more than once. It's not just like this one-off thing, one-off experience.
Right.
Those kind of common ones.
Yeah, so let's talk specifically about your situation of procrastination, which is a common one. So procrastination has a spectrum, right? There's people who tend to work a little bit better under a deadline, a slightly pressurized environment. It works for them because they're getting stuff done. How do we know it works for them? We're getting stuff done. They're making deadlines. The desired outcome is achieved. Then there's the rest of us on the procrastination spectrum, where we put things off, and what we're really doing often is avoiding because of fear or perfectionism. Is a lot of times people don't understand that procrastination and perfectionism are very tightly connected. But when we're a perfectionist, we think we need a really big chunk of time to do it right, or to do it up to the perfect standards of 100%. And when that chunk of time doesn't magically appear in a windfall or a jackpot from the sky, then we keep kind of putting it off because we think we need more time to do it right. And then we create this situation where suddenly there's not only not enough time, the chunk of time that we thought we need to do it right, there's no time left. And then we kind of avoid, and then there's consequences to that. And then we feel terrible and we're ashamed, or we've created stress or something for somebody else. And that's not the desired outcome. And so I really think about a lot of shifting self-sabotage is really recognizing the pattern from a neutral place. Oh yeah, I have this pattern. I know it's, I'd like to get this project done by, in 10 days. And I'm going to recognize my pattern is to think about it and then kind of put it off and ignore it until 2 days before, which from previous experience creates chaos for me, right? I know I don't have all the resources I need, the information I need. I can't get all the pieces together. That's the pattern. And so I'm going to look for ways that I can shift the pattern this time. So I'm going to, for instance, starting now, put on my calendar for 15 to 20 minutes a day, I'm going to dedicate just some thinking time to mapping out what I need. And then I'm going to calendar 45 minutes of time next week when I get within that 5-day range, and then I can move forward. And so it's not changing you are as a person who's a terrible person who self-sabotages. It's shifting the pattern to notice how it's not working for you and how the results and the consequences aren't working, and I like to make shifts in smaller steps. There's still a little discomfort. I mean, when you sit down for the first time, you have set that timer for 20 minutes. It's still going to be like, oh, I don't want to mess with this now.
Yeah.
But when you make room for that, say, that's okay. That slight discomfort is kind of the price of admission I'm willing to pay to make some forward motion, get some momentum going. And, I'm still going to probably do at least half of the project in the last 5 days. That's okay. That's again where that pressure, the little bit of the pressurization works for me. I'm not trying to turn you into somebody that turns everything in 2 weeks ahead of time. I mean, that's not the goal. It's to not have the consequences that are going to hurt you reputationally, hurt your self-esteem, hurt your organization, and the things that are consequences that none of us want to see.
Yeah. Something that it makes me think about is, the concept of imposter syndrome, which is something that is so prevalent, particularly amongst high achieving women. And so talk to me about how self-sabotage and imposter syndrome are related or not. And I guess that dynamic, because I think,
I think they both, imposter syndrome is really often a crisis of confidence, right? It's hard for me to believe in myself because I'm looking out at the rest of the world and deciding that everybody else knows what they're doing and I somehow don't. And who am I to do, whatever it is? And so, if I had, say, a client who owned their own business and was developing the business, a lot of times when I'm first talking to them, they'll tell me about everybody else who's in the, realm, who's already doing, what they're doing. And I said, that's okay, right? It's okay to think about like what's working for them. Is that going to work in this situation? I'm not criticizing that. But then this next step, which making it mean that because you are not that human being or you haven't cloned that human being, you can't have that. That's where the imposter syndrome starts to mess with our head in a way that can create consequences that are not going to work, well for us, right? So the business person is only looking at competition and then secondarily saying, or only looking at other people in the stratosphere or who represent what they see themselves trying to achieve, and then saying, well, I'm not that, so therefore, who am I to pretend that I can run my own business? And then making decisions based on that, who am I, which is really another way of saying I'm not enough, I don't believe in myself, and making decisions which may be fear-based, which might be small. So a lot of times it's people pleasing, it's saying yes to things, not having boundaries, not being clear, playing scared instead of being willing to take what are reasonable risks in order to make your business or work succeed. And so those are the decisions we tend to make when we're steeped in that imposter syndrome, or the I'm not really good enough to be where I am. We tend to make decisions that keep us small.
Yeah.
And that's a way that we are sabotaging our potential for success. It doesn't mean you're guaranteed success and you're never going to fail if you, as long as you always believe in yourself, never have imposter syndrome, you're still taking risks, but you're also more equipped to be resilient, to work around the failures, to take the data that comes from failures and use them to integrate into future success.
Well, I love how you just did the word data. I mean, because I do think about words, like words matter. And even as we started this conversation, you were saying, it's not focusing on like the negative and the sabotage and these negative, it's like, okay, what's being solutions focused and the empowerment. And I don't know, I think those words really do matter. But I also like how you said like the data, and as I'm thinking about how to identify some of these negative, some of these self-sabotage, these patterns and things like that, like how someone can identify, whether it's taking the data to identify, taking time to find the data in their life or in their career experiences, or, is it engaging with other people, maybe a business partner or a life partner, or other ways that people can sort of collect some of this data about themselves so that they can make sort of that positive forward moving plan for themselves.
Yeah, life partner and spouse are going to be tough because a lot of times our patterns are pretty ingrained with that. But it's a trusted thinking partner. It's a mentor, a good friend, a business advisor, a coach, a therapist. Sometimes it's being able to say, okay, I keep doing this and this is the outcome that I am getting. And this is how it's making me feel, right? You could even just right now, just grab a piece of paper and write it down. Like, this is the outcome that I have that I don't love, right? We start there at the end of the equation. You put that on the right part of the equation. And what's the behavior that is preceding that outcome? What thoughts are preceding that behavior? And so you go kind of work it backwards. So, right, if I'm talking to somebody and they're irritated and stressed out and overwhelmed all the time, and I'm saying, what's the behavior that's leading to that? Well, I'm working, 50 hours a week because I don't feel like I can stop working. What's the thought that's making you work 50 hours a week? Well, I'm going to lose it all, or everybody else is doing better than me, or usually one of those really unhelpful thoughts. I'm going to go, oh, okay. So if I can, flip the script on that unhelpful thought and say, and get a little more attached to who I want to be, how I want to feel, how I want to show up in the world, and then notice what behavior comes from that, we're more likely to have a result that is going to feel more in line with who we want to be and how we want to show up in the world.
I was just going to say, I want to repeat that. I want to pull up Brene Brown. Hold on. Let's repeat that. Who I want to be, how I want to feel, and how I want to show up in this world. I think that's really, and then I love that concept of working backwards from there and saying, work from the outcome, and then even being able to identify those ways that we get in our own way. I also, when you mentioned how the spouse and the partner can be kind of a challenge, is that sometimes when it comes to self-sabotage, whether it's in work or personal life, sometimes it's that our loved ones, or in other capacities, our coworkers potentially might be playing into that, because our self-sabotage actually, or those ways that we get in our way, kind of serve them, and sabotage maybe serves creating a sense of normalcy. And it's like, if you stop self-sabotaging, the world's going to change, our relationship, or you might grow too much, you might a coworker might be afraid of the success that you get. So is that ever
Yeah,
a
it can
thing?
be jealousy. I think more often it's when you're really scared, and if somebody's really close to you, they're likely through emotional contagion to take on that. So if you're freaked out, they're freaked out. And when we're freaked out, we don't tend to be able to be in that neutral place of a calm, clear space where we can say, what's working, what's one not working, in that, in that more analytical, right, back to the data, what's working and what's not working. And so when we feel freaked out, and if somebody else needs to fix it for us because they're freaked out too, generally speaking, what we're going to see are fear reactions, which we know when we're in that fight or flight mode, we lose 13 IQ points. We tend to be very myopic in our view. We don't have the ability to kind of look at that bigger picture. And that's another really key to self-sabotage, is a lot of times it's when we get tense, insecure, which is fear, that's when the wheels fall off. And that's when we go make that reacting without thinking, amygdala driven kind of, which is that part of our brain that can only say danger alert, has no sophistication abilities at all, none of that prefrontal cortex that can make good decisions for us. And when we get in that spot where we're just reacting without thinking, that's a lot of times a source of what we would later look back and say, that was self-sabotage. I took that situation, I got scared, I put the brakes on, and I just really needed to keep driving over the hill.
Something that, you just talked about some of the negatives that can happen when we're in that fight or flight mode and some of the negative effects. What about the flip side of that? Like when we are feeling calm and empowered and we're able to either stop ourselves, like when you come from that confident, empowered, not fearful place, how do our brains change? Like how much more positively and differently do we show up and are able to handle some of these situations and make better, react instead of respond?
We're so much better at collaborating. We know that for, the brain science tells us we're better at resource gathering, looking at what's available instead of that, again, as I mentioned, that sort of short-sightedness of it's like, what are my options here? How can I harvest options, as opposed to hyper focusing? It's a lot of the research that we know from the people that taught us in the positive psychology realm about growth mindset versus fixed mindset. The growth mindset says, here's the obstacle. Let's think of all the ways that we can move around the obstacle and then think through it. The fixed mindset, there's a boulder on the path. We're done. Turn around, go back. We're done. And where we really need to be is on the other side of that boulder. And so that's being in that calmer and clear space, per your question. We just have a lot more ability to take a challenging situation, grow from it, build on it, and have it be something that actually makes us, stronger, smarter, better.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. I feel like I could talk with you. I mean, there's like a million different directions, especially with all of your expertise when it comes to stress and time management and burnout, which, I mean, if anyone who hasn't sat down and heard, I think you've done talks for us, which are available on demand on Rise TV about burnout. And there's so many great resources on your website. I know you have some good blog posts and things I know you've done as well, for people who want to hear more from you about your expertise in these areas. What would be the best place for them to go to engage with you?
Yeah, if you go to jillfarmercoaching.com into the ideas section, I've written a number of articles, very short, very digestible, on this idea of stress and success and how to get our brains to work for us instead of against us, even in challenging situations like those that we've all experienced in the big disruption that a lot of us have experienced in the COVID-19 journey that none of us signed up for, but that we all got to go on last year. So yeah.
You did get to go on, but if there's one thing too, and that takeaway and here is we're at and around marking that 1 year mark. And whenever anyone is watching this, I actually can't wait to watch. I should go back and watch this a year from now and hear these words, where it's to think about, there's so much growth that I think we're all coming through and experiencing. And so, in sort of that self-awareness and better understanding ourselves and how we really respond to true crisis and truly difficult situations. And, so much of our stress management and time management, it's like working out at the gym. You can't just or like running a marathon. You can't just run out your front door and run a marathon on day one. It takes training, it takes work, and you can't expect overnight change. But gosh, I think that we are all we flexed our muscles a lot over the last year, and I'm optimistic and excited about people like you, resources like you, and people having that awareness and being able to, kind of think about and identify, take some of the data in about who they are right now, and then what they can use to take that data to make some positive change in their careers and lives. And so I'm excited about that.
Yeah, I think you said something beautifully, right? We all got a strength training lesson in resiliency in the last year. And anyone at any time, whether it was a big plot twist in our lives like COVID, anytime we break a pattern of self-sabotage that's been there for a long time, we strengthen a new muscle. And anytime we strengthen a new muscle, we give ourselves the greater chance of resiliency to handle whatever comes in our way in the curriculum of life that comes down the pipe. So there is something meaningful that come out of it. Doesn't mean it's always easy, but something meaningful definitely comes from being willing to understand where self-sabotage is happening and being willing to pivot enough to strengthen some new muscles instead of going back to the same ones that aren't working out so well.
Yeah, to get out of our own way. Jill, thank you so much. You're an amazing strength trainer, personal trainer, and this amazing fitness journey that we're all on. And I appreciate the opportunity to sit down and work this out with you. And yeah, encourage everybody to reach out to you with questions, absorb all the Jill Farmer resources they possibly can, because you're the best, Jill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great one.